Summer mornings in Corvallis, Oregon, typically drift by with the characteristic tranquility of a small college town. The gentle morning sunlight filters through lush green canopies, casting shimmering patches of light across student housing complexes, filled with the fresh scent of newly cut grass. The morning of May 24th, 2004, seemed no different. A peaceful morning, like countless others that had passed in this place. Brooke Wilberger, 19 years old, had just finished filling a bucket with water, preparing to begin cleaning the outdoor light fixtures at the apartment complex her sister managed. It was routine summer work during her break from school, before returning to Brigham Young University for what promised to be an exciting new academic year. In the fresh air of that morning, no one could have imagined that in just a brief moment, an unthinkable tragedy would suddenly unfold. When Stephanie, Brooke's sister, stepped outside to call her in for lunch as planned, the scene before her left her stunned. Brooke's familiar flip-flops lay scattered beside the water bucket and cleaning cloth. The plastic strap was torn and muddy, as if someone had dragged her away in a desperate struggle. Her phone, wallet, and keys remained untouched in her car, the vehicle still locked, showing no signs of forced entry. Everything pointed to one conclusion. Brooke had not left that place voluntarily. An invisible but heavy emptiness began to envelop the Wilberger family, then slowly spread throughout the small community where she had grown up. What could have happened to such a kind girl who always loved her family and lived faithfully according to her beliefs? That question began to haunt everyone persistently, like a chilling whisper. How could someone simply vanish in such a brief moment? Brooke Wilberger was born and raised in a large but loving family in Oregon. As the fifth child in a family of 6 siblings, Brooke was nurtured with boundless love and devoted care from her parents. However, Brooke's childhood wasn't entirely smooth. From an early age, she struggled with speech difficulties, and it wasn't until she was 4 years old that she could speak clearly and coherently like her peers. But rather than letting this challenge become a burden, these early experiences ignited a very specific and meaningful dream in her young heart: to help people with speech difficulties, those who had experienced what she had gone through in her past. Brooke was an excellent student with a gentle, hardworking nature who loved sports. She was passionate about basketball, running, and skiing, always striving to push beyond her own limits. Everyone who had the chance to interact with Brooke unanimously described her as gentle, but with firm convictions. Whenever she sensed something was wrong, she wouldn't hesitate to speak up and defend her viewpoint. Brooke was not weak at all. On the contrary, she possessed a strong inner core, living with deep faith and very clear life direction. When she turned 16, Brooke began dating Justin, a childhood friend she had been close to since elementary school. Both were devout believers, sharing a pure love and dreaming together of a large family with many children. While Justin was serving a 2-year mission in Venezuela, Brooke decided to attend Brigham Young University in Utah, which had one of the nation's top speech therapy programs. All her life plans were built on the solid foundation of faith, genuine love, and a burning desire to help others. When her first year of college ended, Brooke returned home feeling light and cheerful. She took a part-time job at the Oak Park apartment complex that her sister Stephanie managed, just 18 miles from home. It was light work without pressure, just enough to give her some spending money before returning to school in the fall. Those days passed peacefully. No one could have imagined that all those beautiful plans, every dream, every hope for the future, would soon only remain as memories told through tears of sorrow. The morning of May 24th, 2004, was an ordinary Monday morning in Corvallis, Oregon. The atmosphere seemed saturated with the characteristic peace of summer, when the quiet apartment complexes, emptied of students who had finished school, began to settle into a relaxed, quiet rhythm of life. It was Brooke's first workday of the week at Oak Park Apartments, where her sister Stephanie both lived and served as manager. The two sisters had planned to enjoy lunch together after Brooke's work shift. Everything seemed to be proceeding like familiar routine, with nothing unusual whatsoever. Around 10 a.m., Stephanie happened to glance out the window and saw her sister preparing a large bucket of water, carrying cleaning cloths and cleaning solution to maintain the tall light posts outside the apartment complex. With a reassuring smile, she returned to her busy work in the kitchen, carefully tending to lunch and the little children, confident that in just a few hours the two sisters would sit together again, chatting and sharing as they did every day. But time passed silently and suspiciously. By nearly 1 p.m., Stephanie suddenly realized with a start, Brooke still hadn't come home. At first, she simply thought her sister was absorbed in work or having a conversation with one of the residents. But when she stepped outside to look, a feeling of unease began to creep noticeably into her heart. Right at the base of a light post, the water bucket was still there intact, along with cleaning supplies that hadn't yet been used. But most frightening were Brooke's familiar white flip-flops. The plastic connector between the toes had been torn, covered with wet mud, as if someone had used force to drag her away brutally. Everything lay scattered in a strange way, as if life had been suddenly interrupted mid-task. There were no signs of fighting or scuffling, no screaming or unusual sounds. Only an eerily silent emptiness enveloped the entire apartment complex, as if time had frozen at that very moment. Stephanie panicked. She quickly called her husband, and together they began a frantic search throughout all the buildings in the complex. They called Brooke's name until their voices were hoarse, checking every corner, every possible area, hoping to find her sitting somewhere safe. But Brooke's Honda Civic remained parked silently in its usual spot, doors locked tight, with her cell phone, wallet, and all personal belongings still intact inside. By around 3 p.m., when all search efforts had yielded no results, they were forced to call 911. Stephanie's voice when reporting sounded shaky and choked. "I'm the manager of this apartment complex, and the employee is also my sister, only 19 years old. We can't find her anywhere." That was the moment everything truly began, the largest search operation in local history. And it all started from a seemingly harmless morning, with an abandoned bucket of water and a pair of torn flip-flops. As soon as they received the missing person call, Corvallis police immediately dispatched to the scene without hesitation. Unlike many other adult disappearance cases, where police often apply the rule of waiting 24 to 48 hours before taking official action, this time they immediately understood the gravity of the situation. From the way the flip-flops had been violently dragged to the fact that all of Brooke's personal belongings remained in her car, everything pointed to one clear and terrifying conclusion. She had been kidnapped and was likely facing mortal danger. Police immediately launched their investigation by meticulously canvassing the apartment complex and the entire surrounding area. Nearby residents were questioned about every small detail. Had anyone seen anything unusual? Had they heard any strange sounds? Were there any strangers in the area? A few people provided noteworthy information. They heard a female scream around 10 a.m., exactly when Brooke was last seen working. However, none of them witnessed the incident with their own eyes. The apartment complex had no security camera system, no clear witnesses, leaving only an increasingly thick feeling of unease spreading. The investigative force was divided into several specialized teams to maximize effectiveness. One team was assigned to review the entire list of registered sex offenders living in the area, a staggering number of nearly 2,000 people. Another team began methodical questioning of each resident, searching for any suspicious behaviors, habits, or signs. Buildings were thoroughly searched from dark basements to hidden corners on rooftops. Meanwhile, the FBI was also officially deployed to join the investigation with full resources and expertise. Within just a few short days, Brooke Wilberger's mysterious disappearance had quickly escalated to become one of the most widely reported events and attract unprecedented attention in Oregon. Among the list of people needing investigation, Brooke's boyfriend, Justin, couldn't escape initial police suspicion. But very quickly after, he was completely eliminated from suspicion. Justin was serving his mission in Venezuela, thousands of miles away from where the incident occurred, and had clear alibis throughout the time Brooke disappeared. When Justin received news of his girlfriend's disappearance, he was completely devastated. The girl he was counting down the days to return to and propose to, the person with whom they had dreamed of a happy family, had suddenly vanished without a trace. His pain was not just the pain of loss, but also the helplessness of being so far away, unable to do anything to search for or protect the person he loved. At this point, police faced what seemed like an unsolvable puzzle. A kind girl living a clean life, who had never made enemies with anyone, suddenly disappeared as if some invisible hand had cruelly pulled her out of life. There was no clear motive, no enemies, no suspicious connections in her past. And the biggest, most haunting question at that time remained, who was the perpetrator, and what had happened to Brooke? When information about Brooke's disappearance spread throughout Oregon and was widely reported by the media, many tips from the public were sent to police. Among them, one name stood out that investigators couldn't ignore and had to focus on immediately: Sung-Ho Kim. Kim was a 30-year-old man living reclusively with his parents in an area about 50 miles from Corvallis. The reason he immediately came into police focus was due to a series of deviant and concerning behaviors from before. Kim had repeatedly broken into university dormitories with a bizarre purpose: stealing women's underwear. When arrested and searched, police discovered a horrifying scene in his house. Thousands of pairs of underwear were packed throughout his bedroom, carefully arranged into separate bags and compartments, like a sick collection stored and categorized intentionally. This wasn't random behavior, but an obsessive habit that had continued for a long time. But what was far more frightening was hidden in Kim's computer. When digital forensics experts conducted analysis, they discovered tens of thousands of images and videos of extremely violent sexual content, including scenes of brutal rape, savage torture, and even detailed simulations of murder. This volume of content was not only massive, but also systematically organized, showing Kim had spent considerable time collecting and studying them. However, what truly made investigators feel chills down their spines was a special document titled OSU. Saved right on the computer's main screen. This was a detailed guide written in English, describing step-by-step specifics for carrying out a kidnapping and rape without being detected by police. This document didn't just stop at theory, but was extremely detailed and practical, listing even the type of clothing to wear to avoid leaving DNA, necessary items to bring, the best time to act, and even methods for handling the scene to erase traces. In the context of Brooke disappearing right near Oregon State University campus, where Kim had been lurking and had been caught multiple times, this document became an all-too-obvious clue. Police immediately obtained a search warrant and planned to raid Kim's house early one morning, nearly a week after Brooke's disappearance. Police forces stormed the house while the entire family was still sleeping. Kim was arrested on the spot. But despite all the evidence of deviant behavior, one thing that soon led to a dead end. There was nothing directly linking Kim to Brooke. No DNA, no witnesses, no location data. While Brooke disappeared, Kim was confirmed to be shopping with his father at a large store near home, with receipts and security camera footage. Kim was convicted on charges related to illegal trespassing and possession of obscene materials, but he was not Brooke Wilberger's kidnapper. Kim's family later even sued the police for raid methods they claimed were aggressive and humiliating. They were awarded over $300,000 in compensation. When suspect Sung-Ho Kim was eliminated from suspicion, the fragile hope that had just begun to flicker in the hearts of the family and community quickly faded. Time passed day by day, then week by week. Brooke remained without a trace, as if she had evaporated from the world. But investigators wouldn't allow themselves to stop or lose heart. Among hundreds of vague information and leads that led to dead ends, one important clue began to emerge from witness accounts. A suspicious dark green vehicle seen by many people around the Oregon State University area on the exact morning Brooke disappeared. The vehicle was described as an older minivan, possibly around a 1997 model, bearing Minnesota license plates, a notable detail since Minnesota was thousands of miles from Oregon. Some students reported that they had been approached suspiciously by the driver of this vehicle. Once, this person tried to talk to a female student, frightening her so much that she had to quickly report it to campus security personnel. Another witness clearly remembered a frightening scene: the vehicle driving around in circles as if stalking, following female students, then suddenly stopping, the driver getting out and opening the back door as if preparing to stuff someone inside. That student had quickly left without daring to look back, but that image was etched deeply in her mind. However, although the accounts were somewhat consistent about the vehicle's shape and color, there was no exact license plate number. No security cameras captured a clear image of the driver's face, and no one remembered enough detail to create a composite sketch. Those patched-together memories weren't enough to determine the driver's identity, or even verify whether the vehicle was directly related to Brooke's disappearance. Police persistently followed every lead, even tracking down a man named Brian, who had once called 911 to report this very minivan when he saw it speeding dangerously near the area where the disappearance occurred. But after all those efforts, the vehicle remained like a ghost passing through the scene. Everyone saw it, but no one could retain it or find any concrete clues. The investigation gradually sank into absolute deadlock. 6 months passed in painful silence. Volunteer search groups began to dwindle. Volunteers, after exhausting their strength and time, were forced to return to their daily work. The Wilberger family, the Corvallis community, and the entire nation had to face a harsh truth that no one wanted to acknowledge. Brooke might no longer be alive, and the perpetrator had escaped perfectly. But then, in November 2004, the case got a new breakthrough. On November 29, 2004, more than 6 months after Brooke disappeared without a trace, Albuquerque police in New Mexico received an emergency call. A young woman had just emerged from the forest edge, naked, arms and legs scraped, covered in blood, in a state of absolute terror, running across the main road to find safe shelter. She frantically knocked on a restaurant door, trying to open it, screaming for help with a trembling voice. A mother named Dara Finks, driving by with her daughter, witnessed this heartbreaking scene and quickly pulled over, pulled the panicked girl into her car, and immediately called 911. The woman was a 22-year-old Russian exchange student. Through tears, she recounted everything she had just experienced. While walking, a tall man with a shaved head and goatee had put a knife to her throat and kidnapped her. He tied her with his own shoelaces, stuffed her in a car, raped and beat her, then took her to an apartment complex where he left the car and went inside, leaving her alone. In that moment, she broke free from her restraints and escaped. A miraculous escape, and possibly her only chance at life. Based on the victim's description, police quickly narrowed down and arrested Joel Patrick Courtney, a 38-year-old man living nearby. When arrested, Joel sat silently in his car with a crack pipe, a knife, and a cold, emotionless expression. Records showed he had a prior conviction for sexual assault from 1991 and was continuously involved with drugs, alcohol, and domestic violence. His wife, Rosie, had just filed for a restraining order after he choked her unconscious. His sister, Dina, recounted that Joel had once broken a cat's neck for entertainment, had entered her room at midnight trying to rape his own sister. A man so cruel that even his own family shuddered when mentioning his name. And then, an unexpected piece fell into place. When cross-referencing Joel's travel route during the previous period, police discovered he had been present in Oregon on exactly May 24th, the day Brooke disappeared. Not only that, he had also lived and worked in the Corvallis area for many years, and specifically, had driven a dark green minivan, matching perfectly with previous witness statements from the scene. An internal phone call was made between New Mexico police and investigators in Oregon. They only said one sentence. "Have you guys ever heard the name Joel Courtney?" And like a lightning strike, the entire Oregon investigation team fell silent. No one wanted to believe it, but every detail began to fit together too perfectly. Joel wasn't just present at the scene, didn't just have an identical vehicle, he also carried within him the complete profile of a purposeful predator. From a miraculous escape of a Russian student in faraway New Mexico, the fog surrounding Brooke's disappearance finally began to lift. But the price to pay for this truth would be more painful than the Wilberger family could ever have imagined. When information about Joel Patrick Courtney was transferred from Albuquerque police to the Brooke Wilberger investigation team, a heavy and tense silence fell over the entire meeting room. Every piece from before, the suspicious vehicle, the timing, the location, and even the brutal kidnapping method, all began to fit together frighteningly, as if someone had predetermined the entire picture from the beginning. Police immediately began tracing the vehicle Joel had used at the exact time Brooke disappeared, and they found it. A green minivan, exactly the style and model year that witnesses had described in detail, secretly stored in an old garage in the Albuquerque suburbs, far from where Joel lived. A forensics team was immediately deployed and began examining the entire vehicle interior meticulously, removing each layer of seat cushioning, collecting every small dust sample, scanning every nook and cranny with precision down to the millimeter. Time passed heavily and anxiously for Brooke's family. But then, a DNA analysis result caused an explosion in the laboratory. Brooke's blood was discovered scattered on the vehicle floor. Her hair, along with a hair tie containing perfectly matching DNA, was found in a personal bag that Joel had carelessly left behind. There was no longer any doubt. Brooke had been in that vehicle, possibly still alive in the final minutes, or had not survived. More importantly, traces showed she had been brutally raped, following exactly the same behavioral pattern that Joel had implemented with the Russian victim in New Mexico. The approach to the victim, sequence of actions, restraint positions, everything followed a cruel and systematic procedure that only a professional predator with extensive experience could repeat so precisely. At this point, Oregon prosecutors began preparing an indictment they knew would shake the entire state. 19 serious charges against Joel Patrick Courtney, including 14 counts of aggravated murder in the first degree, organized rape, kidnapping, sexual abuse. Although he had never admitted a word about his crime, although Brooke's body had not yet been found as final evidence, prosecutors were completely ready to bring him to trial, with the full weight and determination of the justice system. They believed that scientific evidence and forensic traces were strong enough to convict this perpetrator. When Brooke's mother, Cammie, received the call announcing that Joel was officially identified as the killer, she was sitting in the car with her husband. Emotions welled up uncontrollably. She burst into tears, then stepped out of the car and danced in the street like a child, expressing joy mixed with deep grief and loss. Finally, after so many long months of waiting in despair, they knew who had taken their beloved daughter. But justice, though firmly in hand, still lacked one crucial thing for the family. They didn't know where Brooke Wilberger's body was buried, and Joel Courtney, with his cold smile like ice, clearly knew that. He was willing to use that terrible secret as a chess piece to trade for what he desired most. Joel Courtney had been formally charged. He had been arrested, imprisoned, and prepared to face trial. But throughout the many years since being arrested for the savage attack in New Mexico, he stubbornly maintained absolute silence about Brooke Wilberger. He wouldn't admit to anything, wouldn't say anything useful, showed no remorse or regret about his actions, and most importantly, never revealed where Brooke's body was hidden. For him, that was his final and strongest card, a psychological weapon to trade for clemency and leniency from the legal system, the only thing that could save him from the death penalty awaiting him. But Joel's stubbornness also had limits. It wasn't until he was denied anxiety medication and had to endure solitary confinement under harsh conditions that he began to waver and show uncertainty. He made a cruel proposal. If he didn't have to face the death penalty, he would reveal where Brooke's body was hidden and confess to everything he had done. After many weeks of tense debate and careful consideration, prosecutors finally agreed to this painful deal. They understood that taking him to trial and sentencing him to death would be meaningless if Brooke's family could never bring her home, could never have a burial place to remember her. In September 2009, after years of stubborn silence, Joel Courtney officially changed his testimony and led the police team to a desolate trail about 7.5 miles from where Brooke was kidnapped, deep in a remote forest area where no one could have accidentally discovered it despite decades of searching. Under a fallen, rotting tree trunk, covered by a thick layer of dry leaves, they carefully excavated skeletal remains that had almost completely decomposed, but still retained the delicate silver watch that Brooke's mother had given her for Christmas the year before. Although Cammie had mentally prepared herself, as soon as she recognized the watch, she immediately broke down in tears. Forensic experts quickly made official confirmation. It was indeed Brooke Wilberger. The 19-year-old girl with so many unfinished dreams had finally returned to her family, but through tears, pain, and boundless despair. In his detailed and chilling confession, Joel revealed that he had driven around the university area that day with the specific purpose of finding a young girl to kidnap. He had approached 2 other students before, but was refused and unsuccessful. When he saw Brooke diligently cleaning the outdoor lights, alone and unguarded, he approached, pretended to be a delivery person, then suddenly pulled out a knife to threaten her, violently dragging her into the van. He tied Brooke securely with duct tape, raped her right in the vehicle, then drove to a remote forest area. There, he held her captive overnight, and the next morning, when she was still trying to struggle, cry out, and resist to the end, he repeatedly struck her head with a hard object until she died. Joel admitted in his statement, he hadn't intended to kill from the beginning. But when he saw that Brooke was stronger and more resilient than he had expected, when she wasn't afraid but continued to resist fiercely, then in panic and fear of being discovered, he chose the only way to silence her forever. The most infuriating thing was that he never apologized or showed remorse. In the important sentencing hearing, when the judge asked if he had anything final to say to the victim's family, Joel only mumbled a few unclear sentences, then turned away and smiled coldly. A cold and emotionless smile that left the entire courtroom silent as a grave and made Brooke's family feel like another knife was stabbed into their hearts. The court finally sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Cammy Wilberger, with a trembling but strong voice, said in the final press conference, "We don't seek revenge or hatred. We just wanted to find our daughter and bring her home. This ending, though painful and unable to heal our loss, is still the closest to justice we could possibly have." Brooke was buried under the gentle sunshine of her Oregon home. Her story doesn't end with horror or brutality. Instead, it ends with the unwavering strength of a family that never gave up, and the relentless struggle to find the truth, in a world where people like Joel Courtney thought they could forever hide their heinous crimes. And that concludes today's case. Thank you for following along, and we'll see you in the next videos.